housing's been in the news this week, and I want to go around the panel quickly and ask this question. Chester, is housing the biggest issue for people this year?
Not right across New Zealand, but certainly in some parts of it, like Auckland.
What about you, Damien?
Yes, I think it is. Even in areas in the South Island, people can't afford houses because they haven't got a decent income. So it is the core issue across this country.
Martin?
Yeah, it's an issue across New Zealand because some of the changes that have been made by the Reserve Bank have affected the whole of New Zealand when they were just trying to control Auckland. It's an issue across the country.
James Shaw, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Everywhere I go in the country, it's an issue.
All right, let's start by the announcement about negative gearing. Andrew Little says that Labor will introduce negative gearing. Can you explain to the country in 30 seconds how it works?
Well, that is that we can't have people who are going to claim losses by borrowing against houses and to offset their incomes. And so what we've got to do is you earn income, you pay tax on that, you buy a house and you make a loss, then you carry that loss.
And so you're going to slam those small investors who've decided to buy a rental, buy something for their retirement savings. You're going to slam those sort of people, aren't you?
They take their chances. You know, like everyone else, they can invest in the share market, they can go and do something else. You cannot guarantee that just because you buy a house, you're going to make a whole lot of money.
What do you make of that, Chester?
Well, I don't think I think that stacks up whatever it is. I've bought a house, I've made a whole lot of money, I've spent a whole lot of money on it. That's it. I think the problem with Labor's policy is going to hit that little guy and it's going to hit the big, when they really want to hit the big guy. So they're actually doing what they criticise us for.
The IMF last year suggested removing tax breaks. So they're in line with what people like the RF say.
Well, I don't think every time you agree with them that you happen to be right. I know a whole lot of people like you were just talking to. They've just bought a second house or they've bought a flat for their kid or something like that. Why should they be caned, unjustifiably for the small gains they make? I've got big problems with the people who own 30 and they're just squeezing those tax breaks every way they can. But I don't think you want to catch the little guy.
Tracy, what about you? What do you make? What do you make of the Labor's policy on negative gearing? Do you support it?
Well, I can't say whether New Zealand First supports it or not. It's not part of it. It's not part of what we've got coming out. It's not part of the proposal that Dennis O'Rourke's going to release. But unless you start to address foreign buyers and actually restrict house sales, residential house sales to New Zealand citizens and residents, you're not going to address part of the problem. Unless you start to put bans around Auckland and then let people in other areas get 5% deposit or 10% deposit
the answer
rather than
really
20%.
isn't the answer, because I haven't heard much from New Zealand. It's basically building more houses. Look at Auckland. I mean, Auckland, only 7,200 houses were built in Auckland last year. Half required.
Well, that's
it's
right.
extraordinary.
No.
So,
and New Zealand First is holding its powder because every time we release something, Labor or the Nats then go and do it.
Oh, come on.
So we're holding our powder. But
original.
honestly, at 650,000 affordable, at 600,000 affordable, we're the last hope these people have got.
So what's affordable to you?
No, look for
what's
our
affordable
policy.
to you?
Look for
James,
our policy.
what's
300,000.
what's
affordable to the Green Party?
So the average income in this country is about $50,000. You want to be buying at about 4 to 5 times your income, right? So you're talking about 300,000 is really the highest end that most So the idea that the government says
James,
that the government
that
says
is a
that
total
600
pipe dream.
that
You're
650.
you're never ever going to get a house under 600 grand in Auckland.
Well, this is
one
what
of
I'm
we don't
saying.
care.
This is
You
what
can
I'm
come
saying.
and
So
live in the South Island.
the idea that the government can say that 650 and under is affordable, which is 9 times the average Auckland income of 70,000.
Come and shift south. You can get a good house. You can get a good house for under 400,000 in most of the South Island. In most of the South Island.
Wanganui. All right,
Shift south.
Let's go to Charlotte.
Get out of Auckland.
Let's go to Charlotte.
I'm with William Kidwell, who was only 19 years old when he bought his first house. He was also just earning minimum wage. How did you do it?
Well, I obviously couldn't save up a deposit for a house being on minimum wage. So I found a house that had been on the market for 3 to 6 months and not selling. The biggest offer they had was 120. So I decided to pay 180 with them leaving 20,000 equity in the property for me. Yep.
Right, and then you lived out in the garage, and what, did the house up?
Yeah, so I lived out in the garage and put the 3-bedroom house straight on the rental market, and then every time the house was empty in between tenants, I'd do it up at that stage.
What were the sacrifices? Like, could you still eat avocado on toast?
So definitely not. Kind of like a student life, eating noodles, that sort of thing, going to mum's for a good cooked meal, and that sort of thing.
And living in a garage?
Yeah. So uninsulated, freezing. Electric blankets are great,
You're onto your second house now, though. It's obviously worked.
Yeah. So I've sold my rental, which has helped me get into the house I live in. That I have 4 flatmates living with me, helping me pay my mortgage.
It's inspiration. James Shaw, inspiration.
There you go. Well, William, here you go. On behalf of backbenchers, you probably never even seen one of these. You probably never seen one of these, have you?
What is it?
It's an avocado, mate. Here you go. treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Great, thank you.
And smash it up. Interesting, Chester, it's a real U-turn for you guys, eh? Nick Smith, I can remember it clearly, quoting, the government is not in the business of building houses. Nick Minute.
We are.
How can we trust you?
Back to the future.
How can we trust you?
Well, sometimes you've got to change the way you're going. If it's not working, you've got to cut a different track. Governments do it all the time.
They've had...
It just shows they're very slow
testify.
learners.
You want us to stick to a plan that obviously isn't meeting the need, or do you want us to say, OK, we'll go
Straight
your
up,
way? Yeah.
not in the business of building houses.
No crap, just get
they've had
into
their
it.
head in the sand for almost 9 years and they now realise that you've got to put more houses out into the marketplace and you've got to be able to build affordable, which is not what they have committed in this latest policy announcement. We need affordable houses that people can afford to buy and live in, not for speculation.
Okay, so what's affordable to Labor?
Affordable to Labor, I don't think it's about 600,000, I think we've said for Auckland, which seems extraordinarily high if you live in the South Island. No, go and think about shifting down into the provinces where 300,000 or 400,000 will buy you a house. What we've got to do is make sure there are services out around the provinces that will employ people.
The question is, I talked to, I talked to a teacher, Tracy, who came over from the UK back to Auckland. She said, my hometown is now lost to me. She was quite upset. After 7 years, that town is lost. What advice would you have to that senior teacher who's come back to Auckland, now can't buy a house?
Yeah, so I was just talking about this morning to the, the Auckland Primary Principals Association. So what New Zealand First is looking at in the area of education is around the funding for recruitment and retention. So teachers are one thing, but you've got to go wider than that. There's no silver bullet here. I mean, we need low interest loans. We definitely need the government involved here. We've got to look at the rules around covenants. What is pushing these house prices up to 600 and 650,000? And it ain't the price of the consent anymore. That can't be used anymore.
James?
Tracy's right. There's a whole series of different things.
I love it in the corner here.
This is what really frustrates me about this argument, right? One side says, the only thing that you need to do is build a whole lot more houses, and the other side says all you need to do is dampen demand. Actually, you have to do both, and you have to do a whole series of measures across both sides of the supply and demand. Otherwise, nothing works, right? And this is what these guys have found out after 9 years.
Absolutely, and you've got to stop foreign speculators coming in, getting money for nothing and coming and buying these houses.
Let me ask you a personal question, James. Yeah. So you're on 185 plus.
Are you?
I don't know.
Yeah. So you haven't got a house.
Yeah, sorry.
You said you can't afford a house. Where's your money going, mate? I'm in a very privileged position, right? So I'm way ahead of the pack in terms of my ability to hire a house. The reason I don't have a house is because of choices that I've made, right? So I went overseas, I started a business. When I came home, I chose to live in the electorate in which I hope to represent, and that electorate happens to be one of the more expensive ones. So I am saving to buy a house, but it's going, but I haven't yet, right? So that's not the point. The point is, in this country, the vast majority of people, whether you're on low incomes or medium incomes, or even some people on high incomes, can no longer afford to buy a house. On every measure, this is the most unaffordable place in the world to buy a property. It is completely out of control. All right, we've got to move on. Look, stay with us. Your thoughts on that at Backbenchers or hashtag Backbenchers. Next up, who's to blame for our dirty water?